Hi. Thank you for the challenge. I'm a grumpy old dad these days, and I feel very weak in the flesh, as you just saw. But I must confess, I have been working to strengthen my spirit because I've ignored it. I didn't know what a spirit was up until about last year. No clue. No clue. Well, I'll share with you the majority of my retirement speech from January 2019. So you can get a sense of who I am and why I care about this message. Then I'll get to business with the remainder of these videos over the next 22 days. Okay, so I'll try not to talk too long, but it's going to be about 15 minutes probably, so get over it. This is not another adventure of Mike. So for those of you from HB Plant High School, you know what I'm talking about. This is a story of how we come together and as faithful, tender warriors on behalf of our veterans that are sadly suffering. And I have hope and faith this will be a display of love in action through unconditional acts of charity that will benefit humanity as a whole. Does that sound like a stretch? Hope not. Those of us that served in the military have heard it before. Thank you for your service. To me, it's not a personal thank you. It's simply a sign of respect for those who have gone before us and paid the ultimate price, sacrificed everything to offer us the privilege to be able to sit here today. I'll be honest, when I first arrived on a submarine in 1999 after 2 years of training, I believed I'd spend the majority of my time performing duties that were relevant to my specialty. It took me a matter of hours after arriving on the boat before realizing that the majority of my time would be spent cleaning the decks, washing dishes, scrubbing toilets and bathrooms, getting oil out of the bilge, or chipping, grinding, painting the hull of a boat. So I was heading down a path to, just be disgruntled and bitter in general. Then I met our submarine doctor, a hospital independent duty corpsman. One day during drills at sea, we were at battle stations sitting around waiting for something to happen, and I noticed he appeared to be the happiest person on the boat. I asked him why. How could you be anything but sleep deprived and annoyed with life, like the rest of us? He simply explained that life on the boat was a breeze compared to his life deployed to Iraq during Operation Desert Storm, where he spent many days without showers, covered in sand from head to toe from the sandstorms, and he'd have to take turns cleaning out the trains. Not to mention, he was getting shot at, watching Scud missiles fly overhead. Well, that's a pretty clear picture. And it wasn't clear to me at the time, but I took that little bit of perspective in the back of my mind and went on with life. Life as usual. Because that was not my world. Well, the more you learn about the history of war, the more you can appreciate the sacrifices made by our ancestors. American casualties, including deaths and injuries during these wars, paints a very clear picture about the conditions endured by those who have gone before us. During the American Revolutionary War, 50,000 American casualties, half were deaths, half injuries. During the Civil War, over 1 million casualties, and over half were deaths. During World War I, 320,000 casualties. During World War II, over 1 million, and both of those suffered. 50% were deaths. During the Korean War, over 125,000 casualties with 36,000 deaths. During Vietnam, 211,000 casualties, almost 60,000 deaths. Both of those wars saw just about 1/3 of the casualties resulting in death. Since the end of Vietnam, there have been over 62,000 American casualties, over 7,600 deaths, where about 12% of the casualties result in death. I don't need to explain the conditions of trench warfare, or how many casualties could have been prevented, or even ask why we were at war. I can assure you, there was nothing clear about the situations they were in. There was nothing clear about the direction our country was heading, and there was nothing clear about the political agenda behind the war, and there was nothing clear in the explanations to the families back home when they found out about their lost loved ones when they had made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Outside of the United States, there are, of course, many more atrocities from war, and again, it doesn't need to be discussed at how awful it can be. Simply put, war is hell. And unfortunately, it seems unavoidable no matter how much technology improves and humanity evolves. It doesn't really matter what country you're from, what religion you are, who won or lost. Not everyone in these wars volunteered to be there. Not, but when they are there in the trench, what choice do they have but to fight with and for those there with them? Their fellow warriors locked in a battle of arms in which they have no choice but to follow instinct and follow their leaders. What matters is that if it weren't for those sacrifices made, we wouldn't be sitting here today. It's sad, but it's true. I can assure you that I am thankful for their service. After my experience on the submarine, little did I know the challenges I would face later on in my career would be a tiny bit less difficult to endure. It wasn't because of the hard work on the submarine, but it was because of that simple lesson of perspective that my submarine doc told me and shared with me that day. I began to see the world differently, and I realized that no matter where you go or who you're with, life will always be a little bit greener on the other side. More difficult for some and less difficult for others. I began to appreciate the little experiences I had when I was able to bear down when I was faced with challenges in life. And I'm not going to say I can breeze through life now knowing how to keep everything in perspective. But I can say I absolutely thank the submarine doctor for leading me through his acts of service. Today, I have my family, my friends, my coworkers, my fellow faithful, tender warriors that I have had the real honor and pleasure of knowing. I know them as warriors, but I can't say they know me as a faithful, tender warrior. I have witnessed firsthand the quality of work each of them do, and I have seen how many of you live your lives by example with pride and honor, thanks to the social media platform that I truly have a love-hate relationship with. I'm extremely impressed by the caliber of people drawn into the military, and I'm equally impressed by those in my personal network that I'm going to share this message with today. The devotion and time spent by my friends and family making sure I'm okay or my family is doing well is very humbling. Why? Well, because I'm not the best at reciprocating that. Actually, I'm more accustomed to a lifestyle of a hermit crab with my head buried in the sand. I didn't feel comfortable making this video. I just didn't. It's like, well, I'm going to sound like a fool. I'm going to look like a fool. I'm weak. I'm antisocial. Why? Well, because I'm a dad and a husband. Also because, like many of us, we have work to do and very little time to play. Also because I spend 33% of my life sleeping, ideally, approximately 33% doing things like school, work, and driving in traffic, and at least 4% of my time, my wife could assure you, is in the bathroom. Well, that consumes 70% of my life, as it does for most of you. That leaves us 30% of our lives to spend quality time with friends and family. However, I'm not a multitasker. So, with the remaining 30% of my life, I have my own personal issues to deal with, which allows me to be selfish and neglect those that I care about. It leaves me with a hefty excuse to ignore and become complacent in life, especially when it comes to share any of that with those I truly care about. And even those that I can simply just call an acquaintance. That means I have been long overdue for a message like this to come around and confess my very own inadequate ability to reciprocate the faithful, tender warrior lifestyle. The chaplain that served on the aircraft carrier with me in 2008 kindly baptized my daughter on the day of my retirement and then spoke at the retirement ceremony as well. At the time, I was too much of a coward to let him know that I considered myself agnostic, although technically I was better classified as an intrinsic atheist. I didn't have the courage to talk with him about anything that might pertain to my personal life or sharing my values or beliefs. I barely probed into his reasons for devoting his life to his mission as a faithful, tender warrior. A weak moment of mine, I can assure you, in which I fell into the mindset that my thoughts, my concerns, my beliefs were just my business and nobody else's. Besides, in today's world, we are all told that politics and religion are off limits in the workplace. Surely in the military, showing any sort of compassion tends to be a sign of weakness. Not anymore. Not anymore. Chaps also is an amazing advocate for suicide prevention and has absolute concern for everyone he encounters. He spoke about suicide to everyone with us that day and reported that from 2005 to 2015, the data suggested daily 20 to 22 veterans and service members die by suicide. Over the course of those 10 years, that's more than 75,000 deaths by suicide, which is 10 times the total number of American deaths at war dating back to Vietnam. I absolutely thank Chaps for sharing that information with everyone, baptizing my daughter that day, and especially I thank him for acts of service and sacrifice. Nothing in life comes easy. Glory does not stand alone. Focus on family and each other. Work smarter, not harder, to aid each other in this common interest. Time spent serving each other can and will surpass the time you get with your own family. No matter how much, or no matter what trench you're in, those next to you become life or death, and that's all that matters. You live life for family. Define that any way you like, but I assure you, that's not for the sake of self. Sure, we're human and we all will individually succumb to the pressures of life, but don't let those short-lived selfish actions disguise the overwhelming glory of this country and those who have fought for us to be here alive now. Horrible wars were fought by our families to be here today. Move on doing what you know is right, that serves those next to you and ultimately serves our families. You won't lose sleep at night knowing you have done your best to make this world a better place. Each of us have faced challenges, have been in situations where it isn't clear what direction we're heading, why things are going a certain way. Ask each other, what were you thinking? Ask yourself, what were you thinking? And been in our own form of trench warfare, made our fair share of mistakes. Recognize and respect that nothing good in life ever comes easy. But I can absolutely say that looking back on my 40 plus years of life, I wouldn't change a thing. I don't have any regrets. I'm truly honored and proud to be here amongst those of you that I honestly respect more than you can imagine. I look up to each of you for making life appear so simple and easy to manage. You're all absolute professionals, and you represent everything I understand to be American. I have absolute faith in each of you to do what you know is right when nobody's looking. I expect the same of everyone in our country. The big picture of life may not be clear, but to me, looking in the picture in front of me, which is those of you out there, it is absolutely clear. If any part of a history is different, no matter how big or small, I wouldn't be with each of you here today, and I can't imagine it being any other way. I would protect this moment however necessary. Besides, what choice would I have? I want to thank all of you for your service and sacrifice. I want to thank humanity's greatest example of acts of service and sacrifice. He's a true leader by example, as outlined for us by many eyewitness accounts, to the point where people were martyred just for having evidence-based hope and faith in the man. He's my personal savior too, and I absolutely consider him to be a trustworthy and reliable source for aid at any given time. All you have to do is ask the man himself, Jesus Christ. Even God himself was humble enough to understand he needed a support system and gave us a loving example of leadership through his very own Holy Family, the Blessed Mother Mary and his earthly father, Saint Joseph, terror of demons. Not only that, but he assured us through examples of his loyal angels and saints that we can all look to each other as brothers and sisters in arms, as an outlet to cry together now to resolve our struggles and not later. Nobody's got time for later. Time is right now. That connection, no matter how big or small, is what's at stake here. That connection insists we are never alone, never, even when you walk through the shadows of the valley of death.